Hello and welcome everyone to the Varsity Tutors StarCourse series, where if you've been paying attention to the sky the last week and a half or so, you've seen multiple rocket launches by multiple companies. The future of space travel has never been brighter, and the future of space exploration is right now. And that's why we are so thrilled to have astronaut in training, future astronaut Alyssa Carson here with us to tell us all about the future of space exploration and where you fit in. So we're thrilled to have Alyssa here, and we'll hand it over to her in just a second. Because you are an integral part of this, you will be part of mankind's continued exploration deeper and further into space, checking out more and more things. We want to make sure you're an integral part of this class. So before I hand it to Alyssa, I want to make sure you know your job for today. One, there's a chat box to the right of the screen here. Please use it early and often. Alyssa's going to ask you a lot of questions to find out what you know about space travel, where you want to go, and where you think you can fit into the mission. And so answer all of her questions there. And if you have any questions for Alyssa about her experience as an astronaut in training and studying to go up and study the cosmos, planets, moons, all those kinds of things, throughout the class, don't wait until the end. Get your questions in, put your name on them so she knows who's asking. And in the last 10 minutes or so, I'll interview Alyssa with your questions so we can get you some answers to all those things about space and the future of space travel that you've always wanted to know. Also have a camera nearby because in about a half an hour, we're going to give everybody a chance to lean into the screen, take a selfie with Alyssa. And if you upload that to Instagram and tag her handle as NASA Blueberry and ours, Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win a telescope so you can start looking out into space, plotting out where you're going to go, and a membership in Varsity Tutors Cosmic Adventure Camp for the summer, where you can get that much more hands-on with all things space and don't have to wait too long to do it. So speaking of not waiting too long, you guys have waited enough to see your teacher for today. So I think we've been clear for liftoff. Let me hand it over to your teacher, Alyssa Carson.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I am so excited to be teaching this class with you guys and coming on board and starting to share the future of space, right? Space has been so popular lately. So I'm so excited to be able to kind of bring all my knowledge about what's happening right now. And we are also going to be focused on the now, but also the future. And that totally ties into the different opportunities that you guys are going to be able to get involved in. So speaking of that, let me show you guys a little bit of the rundown for today's class and what we are all going to be talking about. The first section that we're going to be talking about is the infinite future, and that's really going to be discussing what's been happening, honestly, just this year. Space has been very booming so much this year, so we're going to be covering a lot of what's happened and what is still to come for the rest of this year. Overall, it's just been so exciting to see how much has happened, and really then we'll move on to our next section, which is going to be what's next. That is going to be covering, what are the next steps in space? What are we working on now to make possible in the next few years? Again, even more stuff that you guys will be able to witness and be a part of. And while we're talking about what's coming up next, it's really important that when we talk about space, we're always talking about some of the challenges. So that's going to be our third section. We'll be talking about some of the cosmic challenges that we have and the challenges that we still face today for some of these big adventures that we want to go on. And then finally, we are going to close with your mission, what you guys can be a part of. As I've said so many times already, there is so much happening right now in the industry and so many opportunities for you guys to get involved with whatever it is you're passionate about. So that's why it's really important that we talk about how you can continue pursuing your own space adventures. So let's go ahead and jump in, and we are going to be starting with a question. So like you said, go ahead, get ready to start answering a bunch of questions because I have them for you. So our first question that we're going to be talking about is that we all pretty much know about NASA, pretty much worldwide. It's pretty common to talk about NASA, but what other groups have sent rockets to space just this year? There has been a lot happening, so go ahead and type in your answer into the chat, and I will go through a few before I reveal a few of the answers because there are quite a few that you can mention. So let's see here. Like I said, type those in. Let's see what we got. Let's see, we have some people mentioning Blue Origin, which is a big one. Let's see, some Virgin Galactic. Awesome responses. Making sure everyone gets a chance to answer the question. Awesome. So yeah, so kind of going off of what some of you guys have already said, but there has been so many people involved in space just this year. So we have the commercial side of space, like some of you guys have mentioned, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX obviously is a big one, but also globally, there's been a lot of space agencies around the world that have also been sending rockets to space. The Chinese agency, of course, Russia, and so many others that have been sending satellites to all sorts of places, and some even astronauts. So that is really awesome that you guys were able to get some of them. So those are some of the people who are sending them. So let's talk about what these agencies and companies have been doing, what is happening in space. So these are kind of the three major topics that we are going to cover in terms of what's happening right now. So first one is really starting at what was going on at the beginning of this year. Some of you may have watched, but we had a brand new rocket or a brand new rover, sorry, from NASA land on Mars, which was Perseverance, along with the helicopter Ingenuity. So that was a really exciting adventure that happened in the month of February of this year. So if you didn't see that, go back and watch the landing because everything that happened with Perseverance was very exciting. But not only did we have Perseverance actually land on Mars, we actually had two others. We had a Chinese satellite and we also had a satellite from the UAE. They did not land on Mars, but they sent satellites to go and orbit Mars. So Mars was pretty much just a very, very popular destination at the beginning of this year. There's a lot of science being done. A little bit about Perseverance to kind of give you guys some background is Perseverance's main objective is looking for life on Mars. So it's really the first rover we've ever sent with the specific goal of looking for life. So we found water on Mars. We know and love that. And the next step is really looking for any signs of life. Are there bacteria? Is there nothing? What is there? And so that's Perseverance's main mission while also conducting some science. A lot of the other stuff that's been happening this year is really the boom of the commercial space industry. They have been working on these commercial flights for so long, and we have seen them. A lot of you have probably seen them. We had Blue Origin fly yesterday, and then we had Virgin Galactic fly a little bit before that, about, 9 days before that. So a lot is happening in the commercial industry, and we have a very exciting SpaceX launch that is also happening in September, I believe. So really the commercial industry is doing a lot right now. And the cool part about what's happening right now in the space industry is that there is so much collaboration that is happening. You know, NASA has been sending their own astronauts through SpaceX, and we're able to kind of all get to space some way or another. But it's definitely a whole new age of space. You know, back when we were planning on, or first starting out in space and planning on going to the moon, there was a space race that we're all pretty familiar with that we kind of covered a little bit in the last class, but there was the space race between US and Russia and getting to the moon. And it's almost like we're in a new kind of space race, except almost like a little bit more of a healthier space race. You know, we have a little bit of competition because, you know, some of the government agencies are able to see what the private sector is doing and vice versa, but also at the same time, they're all collaborating. And that's really amazing to see because for the first time ever in space, we're able to do more than one thing at a time. We're able to have plans of going deeper into space while also going to the International Space Station while working with other countries. There's a whole lot of collaboration happening. So although there is that level of competition, there really is a lot of exciting stuff happening. And it's really exciting that we're all able to just watch it on our computers and be a part of some of these momentous events. So that is really kind of the bulk of what's happening in space. And so I want to really spend a little bit more time focusing on what the future is, because that's what you guys can be involved in. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is going to be about what's next and what the future holds. So we have another question for you guys to answer. So go ahead and try to tell me where the Artemis mission is going to take astronauts. So the Artemis program was announced a little while ago. It's been in the works for quite some time. So let's see, give me your best guesses about where you think the astronauts will be going if they are part of the Artemis program. So let me read through some of y'all's responses. Let's see, we have the moon is mentioned. I see some Marses. Very cool, very cool. Where else could they be going? Other places, maybe? Other planets, maybe? Awesome, awesome. Yeah, great responses, guys. You guys, I feel like you guys are really on top of these questions. I'm very impressed. But yeah, so as we talk about what's next, one of the big things is really the Artemis program. And it's something that has been in the works for so long, pretty much ever since we ended the space shuttle program in 2011. We've been looking to see what is next in space. And so pretty much what the Artemis program is NASA's next major program to start sending people further. So the plans right now actually are to go back to the moon, and that should be around 2024 is the goal, and then eventually on to Mars. So those are the two destinations that Artemis is really centered around. It is also very centered around sending the first female to the moon, which will be very exciting. And if you notice, the program name is Artemis because Artemis is the sister of Apollo. Apollo was our program that sent us to the moon. Now Artemis will be sending the first woman to the moon as well, and of course eventually Mars. But Artemis is really our next big thing in space that's going to be happening via NASA, and so there really is a lot of excitement coming with that. And like I said, 2024 is coming very quickly. So Artemis is really in the works. And I want to show you guys just a little bit because the Artemis program is going to be using the SLS Space Launch System rocket. So I actually have a little model here that I want to show you guys. And this is going to be the rocket that will be bringing us back to the moon. If you kind of remember when we went to the moon to begin with, which was the Saturn V, it kind of looks almost identical to the Saturn V, but it also has some boosters on the side to give us that little extra oomph to go to Mars when we are ready. But that is really the main rocket that we are using, and there are a lot of amazing astronauts that are already selected for those missions and training. So like I said, keep an eye out for Artemis because it is going to be really exciting to finally have people going back to the moon, continuing to do more science. But we will continue to talk about some more stuff that is coming up in the space industry, which is also the James Webb Telescope. So along with sending humans, we can never do one thing at a time in space. We want to send humans as well as loads of other things. So that kind of ties into the James Webb Telescope. And the James Webb Telescope is essentially going to be replacing Hubble. So some of you may know what the Hubble Space Telescope is. It was put up in space using the Space Shuttle program, which was really amazing. It has also had several repairs throughout the years, so it has done its job and some more. So we are really excited to be able to put up some new technology to do some imaging in space. So the James Webb Telescope is going to be launching later this year in November. So again, more stuff happening this year to look forward to, but that is going to be a really exciting launch. And once James Webb gets up and running, we're going to be doing some really amazing imaging of deep space. So the main purpose of it is to be able to gain a little bit more knowledge about what's happening really deep in space. It's going to be looking at like star nurseries. It's going to be looking at nebulas, other galaxies, maybe even looking for planets that look very similar to Earth. There's a lot that James Webb is able to look at, and it's going to be even better than Hubble because it has some of that newer technology. So that's a really exciting thing because we are really able to learn a lot about science and a lot about where how the Earth was formed, how our solar system was formed. We can learn all those kind of deep thought questions by using these really awesome telescopes that can kind of see so far, and we can watch other solar systems form even if they're several light years away. So James Webb is a very impressive piece of technology that we're going to be setting up. So that's another thing to look forward to. And again, like I said, there's always more happening in space. So it doesn't just stop with people and telescopes. There is also civilian space travel, which is an entirely new thought and idea. We have thought about the idea of space tourism and civilian space travel for several years now. So to kind of give you an idea, some of these private companies like SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, a lot of these companies have been in existence for several years. They've almost been in existence for like a decade now. They were created a long time ago with the idea of making civilian space travel a thing. And it is a thing that's coming up really, really soon. As we've seen over the past few weeks, being able to send everyday people to space is slowly going to become more and more normal. And that is going to be through civilian space travel. So the main purpose of some of the companies like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin is really focused around space tourism and bringing everyday people to space. And you might be wondering, Yeah, going to space is really awesome. But what's really the point of sending everyday people to space? Why is that such a focused goal of, a lot of major companies right now? And the reason why we're trying to send everyday folks to space is really to, one, have more of a connected spirit with space. There are a lot of people, I think, of the general public who feel pretty distant from space, as you would, just because it's not something that we're all involved in. But also a big thing is the overview effect that a lot of people talk about. When you're in space and looking back at Earth, seeing how fragile it is, seeing how thin the atmosphere is, just being able to see the Earth from that spot and from that amount of distance really has a pretty amazing effect on people. And so it's really cool to be able to allow an everyday person to get that same sensation and really look back at all Earth is doing for us. And so a lot of people come back with a cool appreciation of space travel and also the Earth in general. So that's kind of a lot behind the mentality of civilian space travel. Of course, we're working on sending people to space. There's, the long-term goals of space hotel, living in space. We will get there eventually. I have no doubts about that. But for right now, most of these civilian space travel flights are relatively short. So typically you'll only get around 3 to 4-ish minutes of microgravity, being able to float. And in total, if you saw Blue Origin's launch yesterday, the whole flight is like 15 minutes. It's kind of like an up and a down sort of deal. You get to experience space, but it's definitely not long term. But that is something that I'm sure we will continue to add on to in the future. So lots of exciting stuff. Like I said, civilian space is super cool and another amazing addition to space travel. So we are going to move to the next thing, which is, of course, preparing for space bases. When we think about the Artemis program and going to the moon, going to Mars, there's a lot of exciting stuff with that. But we don't just want to go there. There's obviously more goals than just saying that we made it and sent people there. So really the idea behind that is actually space bases and having people actually live on other planets. So the idea of actually going to Mars is just seeing, can humans live on another planet? Can we go through all this stuff and actually make it there, live there, and then eventually send humans back? And a lot of thought behind this is really the idea of, let's say we needed to go to another planet, the idea of terraforming another planet, almost making a second Earth. But some of these bases are really going to prepare for that. So there's a lot of options, a lot of really cool technologies coming out in terms of bases. What are astronauts going to live in when they go to the moon and eventually to Mars? What are some of those ideas? Some of the cool stuff that has been coming out is, maybe living under the surface. There's different like lava tunnels that have been made years ago on the moon and Mars. Can we actually put habitats under the surface to protect us from radiation levels and possible debris? So there's a lot of cool ideas coming into play about actually space bases, what kind of habitats, what can protect the astronauts the most, and those sort of things. And like I said, as we kind of continue to develop these big ideas of space bases, the thing that I love the most about the idea of a space base is that we're actually solving a lot of problems that, yes, relate to the moon and Mars, but can actually relate back to Earth. And that's one of the fun parts about these space travel in general, is that almost everything we do comes back to Earth in some way, whether that is a new technology, a new solution. And Mars is really going to be a big part of that. We're going to be solving a lot of problems, but then we can use those solutions to solve problems that we might have here on Earth as well. So space and also life down here on Earth are so connected in so many different ways. And I think the space bases are going to be another aspect to that, because we are going to be solving so many problems of living on Mars, and we can use those cool solutions to actually solve problems here on Earth. And Mars and the moon just kind of make us think out the box a little more to come up with those solutions. So I hope all of those upcoming things happening in space excites you guys, because that is really all you have to look forward to. There is so much happening, and I promise there's even more that we didn't cover in terms of different research and science that's happening in terms of other areas of space. But those are kind of some of the major ones that we can look forward to. But we will also continue to talk about some of the more challenges that we are going to face as we look to do all of these cool stuff in space. So there isn't space without a few challenges. Space is something that is very difficult to do. That's why whenever we have any sort of successful flight, it's really amazing to look back at all the challenges that we are able to overcome. So my question on this topic is very interesting. It is, what is between Earth and the moon? So just kind of think about it for a moment. Think about what the options for this answer might be. What is between Earth and the moon? Is there anything? I don't know. Let's see what you guys are saying. Let's see. We have a few folks mentioning the International Space Station. Great guess. Continue to put down your best guesses. Think about it. Is it a trick question? Is it not? Let's see. Satellites, another great response. Awesome. Yeah, awesome responses from you guys. So what is between Earth and the moon? And, when we think about it, we go out at night, we look up at the sky, we see the moon. It looks pretty close to us. And so we don't really think about how much might actually be between Earth and the moon because we see it, it looks so close. But there actually is a lot of stuff out there. We have a lot of stuff in space. Over the years of space travel, we have sent, of course, like the International Space Station, we have people living in between Earth and the moon, which is insane to think about. We have people right now living on board the International Space Station. We also have loads of satellites that are doing so many different things: internet, weather, endless satellites that are constantly collecting data that help us with life here on Earth. And a lot of those are out there. So we have LEO, which is low Earth orbit, and we also have GEO, which is geosynchronous orbit, and those are kind of like the two levels, the two major levels of orbit that we have in between us and the moon, and those are pretty much jam-packed with so many technologies that, like I said, really are in charge of so many major things that we have, are things that we have and also things that we use down here on Earth. So that's really cool to think about, is that stuff is up there floating as we speak. So a really cool topic to kind of think about, I always get blown away every time I remember that there's astronauts in space right now. It's really a fun thing to think about. So we're going to be going through some of the challenges that we do have with some of this space travel that we're looking at doing. And speaking about all of these satellites and all the stuff that is up there, that kind of brings our first challenge, which is space junk. So as you can guess, as we have sent a whole bunch of stuff in space, that means we have also had a whole lot of stuff break in space. We have a whole lot of stuff that just doesn't work anymore. We have sent newer and better things into space, which means the older stuff doesn't get used anymore. All of that leads to a good bit of junk that is also gathered around our planet. And so to kind of give you an idea, even when a rocket launches, a lot of components of the rocket will break off because they're added weight. And so a lot of those components will break off and then continue to orbit. So we have pretty much such a pull with Earth. So all these satellites, they aren't using any fuel, they are just in orbit. So that pretty much means they're constantly falling around the Earth. They're at the perfect spot where they are kind of being drawn in because of our gravity, but also far enough away to keep circling. That's essentially what's happening. We've also had some collisions happen in space. So a few like decommissioned satellites run into each other. That creates even more space debris. So what are we doing about all this space junk? Obviously, it's a challenge. We wouldn't want to have someone on the International Space Station and then like an old satellite come and run into them. Obviously, that's a problem. So we actually track a lot of this space junk. So pretty much anything above the size of like of a screw is pretty much tracked. So there's people, their full-time job literally is watching these satellites, making sure things are happening the way they are supposed to be happening. And to give you an idea, like if someone was on the International Space Station, if a piece of space debris is coming towards the International Space Station, they can actually move it slightly out of the way so that they don't hit each other. And that's why we always are watching, because we want to keep any collisions from happening. But that being said, it really doesn't matter how big or small any of these collisions can be a huge deal. And that's really because everything that is in orbit is traveling 17,500 miles an hour. Like, think about how fast that is. It It is incredibly fast. So even just a piece of paint, a little paint chip off of a rocket from way back when, can cause a good bit of damage. So that's why it's really important that we continue to track space debris, but also looking towards the future, we want to start coming up with solutions to clean up some of that space debris. Is it catching it in a net? Is it trying to burn up any junk in the atmosphere? What is the solution to kind of getting rid of this? Because we are continuing to travel to space, which means we're probably going to continue to add more junk into it. A great solution that we've seen recently is a lot of the newer rockets are becoming more and more reusable, which is meaning we are having less stuff being left in space, but it's still a problem that we have to look out. So that is a pretty major one, but it is not the only one. Sadly, we do have some other challenges as we are looking at the future of space. So let's go ahead to the next challenge that we are going to be looking at, and that is distance and time. So you probably are wondering, like, what does that even mean? What kind of challenge is this? But there is a challenge once we start looking at like deeper space travel. So kind of starting with distance, the moon and Mars are obviously great goals, but as big as, or I guess I should say as small as our solar system feels, it is quite large. So even when astronauts were going to the moon, it would take about 3 to 4 days to actually get there. And as we are looking at going to Mars with current technology, we're thinking it's going to take about 6 months to get to Mars. And so to kind of help wrap your guys' head around these huge distances that we have to cross to actually go to these places, I have a little analogy to kind of help you visualize how far these places actually are. So go ahead and pretend with me that the Earth is the size of a basketball. So if you went ahead, shrunk the Earth down to the size of a basketball, the moon would be about the size of a tennis ball, that sort of thing. Mars is a very similar size, basketball-ish, maybe a little smaller than a basketball. So that's the scale that we're working at. So to kind of give you an idea, Earth to Mars would be 300 football fields. So think about how far that is. Think about how big a football stadium is and how big those fields are. You would need 300 of those to actually put the Earth and Mars on this scale. So that's pretty massive. That is the humongous distance that we have to cross to even get humans to Mars in the first place. And then thinking about how far the moon is, the moon wouldn't even be a first down on the football field. It's only probably about like 27-ish feet separated from the Earth. So probably a little bit further than you're thinking, but still nothing in comparison to how far Mars is. So that is a big challenge that we've been working through for the past few years, because once we have this big idea of going back to the moon and going to Mars, we have to realize how far we're actually going. That's why a lot of time is taken to actually decide when we want to launch, what is going to happen, because we really have to launch when we go to Mars at the right time. So that 300 football fields that I'm talking about between Earth and Mars, surprisingly, that is an average, because sometimes Mars is really, really far away from us, and sometimes it's much closer. And that's because we're all orbiting around the sun. So that means that sometimes Mars is, on the other side of orbit, and sometimes it's at that closest point. So we want to make sure that we're launching at that closest point, which makes us have to think about all the physics involved, all the science, to make sure we are actually launching at the right time, to get the trajectory right, to make sure we're actually landing on Mars. And then the second part of this was time. And that's another thing that you probably wouldn't even think about, but because Mars is so far away, there's actually a time delay. And so that's something that we have to continue to overcome. So on average, the time delay between Earth and Mars is about 15-ish minutes. But like I said, that varies with the distance. So wouldn't that be crazy? I'm sitting here trying to teach a class to you guys, and you don't even hear what I'm saying for another like 15 minutes. And then if you guys tried to ask me a question, it would be another 15 minutes before I would hear it. It's just a very long process. And that's, again, kind of going to the main reason why we want to send people to Mars in the first place. We have these amazing rovers, but with that time delay, it takes a lot of time and work to actually make these rovers move. You know, if you tell it to go forward, it's going to be at least half an hour until you know that it has successfully moved forward. And it's the same thing with the moon. Of course, with it being a little bit closer, a little less of a time delay. Astronauts on the International Space Station, the time delay is like 1 second because of how close they are to us. But the further we want to go in space, we are going to continue to have these challenges of distance and time, and how we are going to make it even better for astronauts, and of course communication, since it's very important that we stay in touch with our astronauts. So let's continue on to our next challenge, which is health. And this, again, another challenge that we are looking at, and we have been looking at for quite a while. Ever since we started really living in space, health was something that we were really interested in. That was really the whole point of having like the International Space Station, Skylab, a lot of these previous like projects that we've had, was really studying how the body was affected in space. And so there are a few challenges. You know, when your body is in space for a long time, you are in this microgravity environment, and that does have effects to your body. And some of the major ones is losing a lot of strength. Your muscles get weaker, you lose bone density. And the main reason for a lot of that is because if you're floating around, your body doesn't remember that it needs to be strong. You know, if it takes no effort for you to float around from one side of the room to the other, then your muscles don't have to be strong because you don't need it to. So even if a lot of you are just sitting in a chair, maybe you're laying in bed, who knows, it doesn't feel like you're exercising, your muscles and your bones are still fighting the force of gravity that the Earth has. But when we go to space, there is no longer that force of gravity. So that's why your bones and your muscles get weaker. I guess the plus side is you grow like an inch when you're in space. So I guess a little bit of height for a little bit of weakness, but health is definitely a concern as we look at going to the moon and Mars, especially going back to some of our other topics that we've talked about, like space bases. If we want to live on these places, although the moon and Mars have gravity, it definitely isn't quite as much as Earth. So we have to think about that. When we are traveling to Mars, which is looking to be a 6-month journey, how do we keep those astronauts physically fit and strong, keep them healthy for while they're living on Mars and also coming back? Because once astronauts come back to Earth, they have a lot of struggles. They have to relearn how to jump, how to walk properly, just because they're not used to so much pressure. You feel so heavy. And that's a big reason why exercise is very, very important when we're in space. Even on the International Space Station, if we aren't doing too long-term of things, exercise is very important. Astronauts will exercise usually around an hour and a half every single day. We have certain exercises that the astronauts are able to do that will work their muscles and their bones, to actually keep them at least somewhat fit. Luckily, on the moon and Mars, there's a little bit more gravity to where those exercises will be even more efficient. But of course, we need to be keeping in mind the health of the astronauts, not to mention radiation levels and a lot of other struggles that we will run into as we try to make these missions deeper in space. Mars and the moon don't have as thick of an atmosphere as the Earth does, so there could be slightly more exposure than what we're used to on the International Space Station. So again, a few things to keep in mind as we go through some of the issues that we've seen. So let's keep going. Oh, sorry, 1 second, just to kind of close a little bit about those challenges, because I'm now realizing how scary some of those challenges might sound in terms of radiation levels and that sort of stuff. But all these challenges that I just talked about, the space junk, all those things are things that we're constantly finding solutions for. So we do have solutions for all of those problems. We are just continuing to make them better and even smaller of challenges. So yeah, I just wanted to reassure you guys that although there are the challenges, we are still making space possible. So with that, we'll actually move on to the next section, which is going to be your mission and how you guys can play an important part and be involved and whatnot. So of course, as we start all of our sections, I'm going to ask you guys a question. So the question for this section is, if you want to be part of the next generation of space exploration, what job should you prepare for? So if we're thinking about, all the stuff that happened this year, we're thinking about what's coming up next, what job should you be preparing for? What job would you want to have as we look towards space? So go ahead and type in all the different space jobs you can think about that will be necessary. and I will go ahead and read some of them. Of course, astronaut has to be in there. I'm sure many of you are interested in being an astronaut, which is amazing. Scientist as well. That's a great answer. Let's see. Engineer. I see engineer a good bit. That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of really great responses, you guys. And this is kind of the fun part, I think, as we get to this next section, is really talking about the amount of opportunities that you guys have. You guys are already mentioning some really amazing jobs and careers that you can go into, but I bet that there's even more jobs than what you're thinking about. The fun part about space travel is that really, if you have any sort of interest, you can connect it to space in some way. Although the scientists, the astronauts, the engineers, they play a very important role in space, so do many other aspects like psychology, journalism. You don't even have to like math and science to be involved in the space industry, and that's something that's really cool. You have the people that have to prepare the food for the astronauts. If an astronaut says, I really want mashed potatoes, how are you going to package mashed potatoes? Do you take all the water out of it? Do you dehydrate it? How would you package it to be as light as possible? There's people who take on those jobs. There's people who study the psychology of the astronauts living, without their friends and family for a little bit of time. How does that affect them? A lot of really interesting jobs, especially like we've talked about, the commercial side of space. As commercial space comes into play and everyday people start going to space, maybe we have space flight attendants. Maybe we have these other really cool jobs that we wouldn't even be thinking about. So I really wanted to mention that to you, so that way you can be thinking of what is like a really weird job that I wouldn't think about that can be done in space. Maybe it's designing spacesuits. Who knows? So really think about that. So kind of going off of what this slide says, there are a lot of goals and a lot of people and talents. So for me, that was a big part of what I had to figure out when I first got interested in space, and to figure out what I wanted to do in space and what I was best at. If you have the idea of being an astronaut, that is great, but there's always some job that comes before wanting to be an astronaut to actually apply. So it's definitely all about figuring out what you're passionate about and what you're interested in doing. Throughout this whole conversation, we've pretty much talked about almost any and every aspect of space, and any of them would be an amazing career to go into. For me, I kind of chose astrobiology, which is what I'm studying right now. I was much more interested in like the science of space and the experiments that we could do, and more specifically, maybe looking for some of those bacteria on Mars, kind of like Perseverance. But yeah, that was kind of the aspect of space that I got really passionate about, and decided that although I want to be an astronaut, I wanted to have that other area of interest as well. And so I browsed the options like I'm encouraging you guys to do, and eventually found the thing that fit best for me. So kind of, I guess, more of a closing is really just to encourage you guys to really find what it is you guys are passionate about. A big topic of conversation that there's been a lot about lately is that space is for everyone. And that is so true, because no matter what your interest is, no matter what your background is, there is a spot for you in the space industry, just because of how much opportunities we have. So leaving this conversation, I urge you guys to really go do some research, have a lot of fun, and yeah, find your own dream and follow it. So thanks for hearing me out.
Hey, thanks for giving us the opportunity. It's pretty amazing. Your enthusiasm for space is palpable. It was just sort of, we started with 35 minutes ago or so, and I don't know that you've taken a breath yet, but we've heard so much energy and passion for it. One thing I thought you and I talked about before with jobs you wouldn't think about being really important in space, and I think kind of furthers that for kids was people like wedding planners. That if we have space bases and we need to figure out, what does everyone eat? Where does everyone sit? How do we make sure that, we land near where the food is, or the next shipment ends up on the same part of Mars or the moon? All those kind of organizational things that, our goals are no longer, can we get there? The goals are, can we stay there? Can we live there? And that means that, so many things, doctors, all kinds of people that keep us healthy, keep us fed, make sure the whole thing is organized will be really important. So speaking of organized, we have another section coming up. I told you guys at the beginning, have cameras nearby. We're going to give everybody a second or an opportunity in just a second. Take a selfie with Alyssa. Maybe she'll break out the Artemis rocket for part of that as well, so we can get a picture with that. while you guys are logging into those phones, getting near the screen and all that, one more reminder, get your questions in. We're going to interview Alyssa with some of your questions here in just a second. And a reminder, once you take that glorious space selfie, if you put it up on Instagram, tag NASA Blueberry, that's Alyssa's handle, and Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win a telescope and an entry in Cosmic Adventure Camp. If you want to learn more about Cosmic Adventure Camp, there can only be one winner, but all of you are welcome there to explore the cosmos with Varsity Tutors this summer. There's a link on your screen to learn a little bit more. It's amazing, all kinds of exciting opportunities. With that, I think everybody's logged into those phones. Some people have probably been smiling for a long time, ready for that. Let me turn it back full screen to Alyssa and let's get those pictures.
Yeah, everyone smile. I'm going to get my Mars globe out for the photo with you guys. So smile.
All right. Hopefully everybody got great pictures there. I will have Alyssa on full screen when she's answering questions. So if you didn't get the perfect picture, you guys know she smiles when she talks about space. You may be able to get the another perfect selfie opportunity there. But let's get, you guys have had some amazing questions. I want to make sure we get you guys a lot of answers. One of my favorites was, right, and it kind of ties right in with the Mars globe and the mission to Mars and everything. Mars is actually not our closest neighbor, right? Venus might be a little bit closer. A lot of people consider us to be fairly similar, in terms of composition, atmosphere, all those things. Why aren't we thinking about Venus as a place to go?
Yeah, amazing question. Kind of looking at what is next to us in the solar system, we have Venus on one side and Mars on the other. And really the main reason why we're looking at Mars as opposed to Venus at the moment is because Venus, although close and very similar in size to Earth, poses way more challenges than Mars. Think about all the stuff we already talked about. Venus surprisingly has more. And the main reason for that is Venus is the hottest planet in our solar system. Essentially, Venus's atmosphere almost causes a greenhouse gas effect. There's a lot of gases that are constantly heating up the planet. And so going to such a warm planet poses even more challenges. Mars is a little bit cooler and, actually offers a little bit of some form of place to live, whereas living on Venus might be extremely challenging. So that's why we're looking at Mars. And of course, the idea of we've all thought about some sort of bacteria living there. So we want to find out if that's true.
That's a good point. Yeah. One of our goals is to find out, is there life out there? We're pretty sure there's not on Venus. Wasn't it the Russians landed a probe on there for all of about a minute before it melted? So yeah, we've sort of tried it and realized nothing's going to survive there. Hey, another huge theme of questioning. I'm kind of looking around who asked it. I know Angeli asked about it. Maya asked about it. Thanks to all of you for putting your name on some of these things. I think Bryson also asked about it here as well. People wanted to know about what astronaut training is like. If you've been an astronaut in training, you've completed the Possum program and all of the NASA space camps and everything. What can you tell us about astronaut training?
Yeah, totally. So the route that I kind of took was, to actually apply as an astronaut, you have to have at least a master's in school. And so that was a little ways away from me. So I decided that I wanted to go and experience as much as I could, get involved in so much real life research that was happening as early as possible. So that's where a lot of my experience comes from. Like Brian mentioned, the Project Possum program was amazing to get involved in real citizen science research, like water survival, doing G-force training, microgravity, spacesuit evaluations, and also even some more normal, sounding experiences like scuba diving. You can really connect to space in a lot of ways, skydiving. And those were really all of the stuff that I was looking for to really start browsing my interest in space and seeing what was out there. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I've done, but really none of it is a have to or necessary. It's just what I found and enjoyed.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those who are interested in hearing a little bit more, we actually have astronaut Leland Melvin doing a class on Monday. So go back through varsitytutors.com, sign up. I know he's going to talk a little bit about astronaut preparation, including things like Alyssa was talking about, making sure they get food that they'll actually eat up there, and, things that, getting fitted for glasses because space does weird things to your eyes. So but great questions. Keep them coming. And we've got Alyssa's answers, and we'll have more answers throughout about the Cosmic Adventure series here at Varsity Tutors. Hey, one of my absolute favorites, huge thanks. I think it's Zarian. I was 4 years old, asked this. He's got a huge plan, but wanted to ask if it's possible. And I think he's got time on his side, so we might be able to get there. He wanted to know, what's the likelihood as a 4-year-old living on Earth today, he might make it to Pluto in his lifetime. And I'll prompt you with this. We talked about, it takes 6 months right now to get to Mars, but we're trying to shorten that with better engines to 6 weeks. Is it even possible that we could get out to Pluto one day?
Yeah, awesome question. Love to hear it. Love the enthusiasm of deeper space exploration. That's what we are hoping to do. You know, once we go to Mars, we don't plan to stop there. Mars isn't like the end goal. Of course, we want to continue exploring more of our own solar system and eventually further. Probably after Mars, what I'm thinking is that we'll probably go to more like a moon of Jupiter, if that piques your interest. I think would probably be our next destination. But to kind of give you a bit of a perspective about how far Pluto actually is. So when we were thinking about the time delay that we were talking about, Mars is about 15 minutes. And we already saw how far Mars is, and the time delay is 15 minutes. The time delay for Pluto is like around like 4 hours. So it is immensely far out there. It is going to be a long trip if you do choose to go there. But probably not too soon. We'll be sending people there. But there's a lot of amazing science happening with Pluto. We had New Horizon go by Pluto, take some photos. So maybe you can get involved in the science that goes along with Pluto. Maybe go to a moon of Jupiter. Lots of exciting stuff that you can still get involved in.
It's also cold. If you're thinking about going, you may want to invest in a couple of coats right now. So it's pretty far, not just far from us, it's far from the sun. But it is amazing, you know, when you think about all the challenges that you're talking about, you know, having been solved already in this generation, solving, you know, that we've gotten up close pictures of all these crazy planets and moons and things. Which actually brings me up to, I think it's Sasha had a great question, said she's really interested in studying things like space rocks and other things that are out there. I was kind of asking what kind of fun facts you have. I'm curious, so as an astrobiologist, why are you so fascinated in moons of places like Jupiter and Saturn, maybe even more so than planets?
Yeah, that is such a cool question. And that's honestly one of the things that I love about astrobiology, which is why I'm in it. But astrobiology really offers a variety of sciences and the ability to research and explore so many different things. You could study plants in space, bacteria in space, you could study planets, moons, you can look for aliens if you really want to. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do. And so within the realm of astrobiology that I'm interested in, of course, you know, possible life, but also talking about different moons. You know, once we go to Mars, we'll probably want to go to a moon of Jupiter because we've already seen a few interesting facts about those as well. We have a few moons that we're looking at that could also have water similar to Mars. You know, is there even life in some of these moons that Jupiter has? So we're always kind of keeping an interest for life and also a lot of water because that's what we connect to life here on Earth. And so there's a lot of science involved in that and seeing, you know, is it possible? You know, maybe the green men are on Mars. Maybe they're actually hiding in one of Jupiter's moons. We'll have to find out.
I do love that the number of moons just kind of multiplies our chance to find cool things like that. There's, you know, we're not just limited to the planets. I know, as Arya mentioned, Pluto, not even a planet anymore, but there's other stuff out there. It doesn't have to be, you know, just one of the planets. Hey, last question for you. Thank you so much for all of your enthusiasm. Thanks to all of you for all of your amazing questions. We're so excited to get on Instagram. If you tag Varsity Tutors and NASA Blueberry to check out your pictures and all those kind of things. What are you most excited about? You know, kind of being you're in college right now, kind of looking ahead at your life and career in space. What's the one thing that you're pretty certain we're going to discover or do in space that you might be personally involved in? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think the thing that I am most excited about is really how normal space is becoming. I think it is such a cool thing, and it really covers everything that we've talked about in this class. You know, whether it is commercial space, whether it's what NASA's doing, or so many other agencies around the world, space really is becoming more normal. You know, some of these crazy ideas like a space base on Mars, it's possible that in, you know, several years that will be normal. We'll be vacationing on the Mars base instead of to Florida or something. So I think that that's really cool seeing so many people, seeing so many other young folks getting encouraged and inspired to pursue these space jobs, and really just talking about space in general. I'm very excited to see how that all happens. And of course, over the next few years, seeing what we discover. And hopefully I'll be able to be part of looking for some of that bacteria, maybe even identifying it. That would, of course, be such a game changer to find life somewhere else.
Well, I have no doubt that you're going to be able to find that. Well, I actually have doubt that maybe we don't know if it's there, but if it's there, I have no doubt that you'll find it and be a huge part of it. And I think one thing that I love about everything you were saying today is that just space is normal now. You know, if you're a kid who dreams about going to space, you'll have that opportunity. You got to work hard for it. You know, pay attention in school. You know, you learn things, kind of, you know, see where new careers and things can take you. But that possibility has never been more likely. Alyssa's proof of that, and so we're thrilled that, you know, you're able to tell us all about what's coming up next, what's coming out in the, you know, the medium term future, and ways that everybody can get involved. So if you're interested in space, there's never been a better time to get involved. The real exact what's next for right now is get those pictures up on Instagram. Let me throw the official handles up here so you guys know the rules here. Again, you have a chance to win a telescope, so you can start exploring the night sky yourself right now, and a spot in Cosmic Adventure Camp. Click on your screen to learn a little bit more. If you want to register, you know, you can click through that link and register there as well. So we hope to see you back for Cosmic Adventure Camp. We've got another exciting space class coming up, like I mentioned, with astronaut Lou and Melvin on Monday, and all kinds of space programming coming around all the time. We hope to see Alyssa here back soon as well. So thanks, Alyssa, for all of your insight, enthusiasm, and knowledge. Thanks all of you for all of your questions and pictures and everything else. And we'll see everybody back here soon.